Welcome, everybody, to the part two of my podcast with industry leaders, Dave and Abhi from Deloitte, talking about the future of L&A and group insurance. So let's kind of dive deeper into a couple areas. First, in the buyer demographics. Dave, you talked a little bit earlier about the future of work and, the different types of employees, and their expectations are shifting in the types of products and value-added services that they're expecting from their employers and the employers that are expecting from the insurers. Talk a little bit more about that, what you guys are seeing.
It's interesting because we talk about the employees having, different experiences or demanding different experiences and more personalization. I think we have to look at the buyers too on the employer side. I think, a lot of the, new generations are coming into leadership positions in organizations and they want to buy differently. They want to engage differently. And so I think that's another piece of pie in terms of thrusting organizations to further digitize and meet the expectations of that new generation who is used to doing things in, on their cell phone, and not having to be handheld through everything. And even for the employees who are collecting their benefits, how do you educate them? And I think there's got to be more done there, a big opportunity there to better educate employees on the benefits that are out there, what is appropriate for them, what do people like them have, and why should they have it, to be able to generate demand in this type of environment.
Yeah, and then that one, another sort of, adding on to that is, how do you, if you look at, enrollment as a process, and the bigger challenge historically the group insurers have been facing is how do you increase that mind share, right? Better share of mind of that end employee, if you will, right? Because my logical mind straight away goes to medical insurance and I'm done. But then, there are all these other products. There is life, there is LTD, STD, and new products that offering, how do you increase their mind share, bigger chunk of it, and use that education to drive those sales, if you will.
Yep, absolutely.
And for insurers, that further complicates matters. And again, if you to what I had previously said, like, B2B to B2C, right? Where insurers are not present, right? That's controlled by the employer, or in some instances, that experience is controlled by the benefit administrators, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you hook into that to even drive that digital experience, or have that contact with that employee, right? And then how, on top of that, to your point, how you're going to sell voluntary if you don't have access to them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all fascinating sort of, concepts, to think about.
Yeah.
And
So,
Denise, you had also mentioned earlier about, portability. And I think anytime there's a big dislocation, I think that, all of a sudden there's a big need potentially for portability and kind of pushes the envelope on it. But I agree with you from your comments before that that's a missed opportunity to be able to maintain customers longer term, and to have that ability, really entrenched in, and the ability to recognize when it's there, to be able to take advantage of it, and to be able to sell into that with additional offerings that you might have.
Yep. It's really traveling the life cycle journey of a customer wherever they might start, or in multiple touch points, and taking them all the way through.
Agreed.
So one of the other areas, kind of to dive a little bit deeper into, is this whole digital thing, and how COVID has really accelerated this, that I think in some cases actually exposed some of the lack of digitization for insurance companies. So the need for contactless technologies, the types of digital experiences that are much more personalized and engaging versus just a standard portal where you enroll into, say, your benefits. What areas are you seeing as priority areas that insurers are beginning to work on, and how does that change their operating model?
Wow, that's a nice, easy question.
Isn't it though?
The fact is that when you look at customer experience across all stakeholders, it's now changed and the expectations are accelerated. I think the challenge a lot of carriers have is that in legacy environments, it can be difficult to enable that kind of digitization. And sometimes you can fake it, but there's some things you just can't fake. If you have a billing process that takes 24 hours, it's hard to demonstrate that a bill was paid and reflected immediately, right? So you try and fake it till you can make it sometimes, but it's also created clear impact in terms of some of the core system capabilities, where it's not that the core systems don't work and do what they're supposed to do, but it's that their legacy nature prevents you from being able to move down the digitization path. And that's why we've seen so much movement in the core space over the last few years, I think, or one of the reasons. It also creates a situation where as they start moving business onto it, the migration becomes really important because putting a new system out there is great, but trying to get all your current book over there is where you really get the payback. And the duration of what it takes generally to migrate business, it's usually many years. And so your operating model is bifurcated for years as you're trying to work on that. And it's very difficult and very expensive to try and get a consistent customer experience across those. Make some difficult decisions, I think, for carriers in terms of how to deal with that.
Or make some strategic choices, right? Technology is like we talked about, one aspect of the operating model, right? Big one, obviously. But how do you make strategic choices in, if it's going to take multi-years, several years to sort of transform, digitize your core, then how do you drive that incremental sort of capabilities still strategically leveraging whatever you want to use, right? Whether you want to use AI, whether you want to use data and analytics, whether you want to use, connectivity as a strategic play, there's still optionalities, if you will, if you can think through that you can layer on top of some of these programs as your operating model changes to still sort of, drive better experiences to your customers, both employee and employers.
Well, one of the other areas that kind of ties into all of this, focus on innovation. And I think that, initially out of the crisis, everybody was focused on just keeping the business running and being able to kind of respond to the crisis in a virtual type of a world. But it has not stopped innovation, and it hasn't stopped an investment in InsurTech, as you pointed out, Dave. So we're still ripe for innovation in this segment. What areas should insurers be focused in on that maybe some of their competitors are focused in on that may be a blind spot for them?
I can take that. So couple of thoughts there. I think historically the industry was bifurcated, even in terms of old school, some sort of group insurers, still antiquated ways of doing things. But we have seen over the last 5 odd years that innovation index picked up significantly. And innovation means multiple different things to multiple different people, right? And you can digitize and call yourself innovative. You can drive those incremental enhancements and call yourself innovative. But from a business standpoint, I think where we will see innovation taking place would be predominantly in areas such as claims. So on the disability side, how do you leverage data to drive better decision making, better sort of visibility into what is the state of affairs from a disability standpoint? Can I predict when certain employees or trends, when certain employees are going to go on leave, so I can manage my operations better in mission critical industries, right? On the front end or the front office side of things, the innovation that I foresee would be mostly around, how do you better sort of, leverage modern technology, cognitive or otherwise, to read contracts, if you will, right? How do you, especially if you look at, large case market, where you sell first and then you look at the prior carrier contracts to look at, what terms were promised by the previous sort of, carrier. Now that is my customer, and how do I meet those terms? And heck, I don't even know what those terms are. Going back to that document, right? Like, how do I track and how do I still sort of efficiently analyze and interpret what those terms are, so I can ultimately set up those customers profitably within my operations and technology environment, and I can serve them profitably, right? And then the middle piece, then if you talk about things around, case installation, and if you talk about things around, eligibility files, and if you talk about, time and attendance type information, how do I seamlessly and rapidly ingest some of that into my operations environment? Again, consistent theme across all front, middle, or back, that there will be innovation across the value chain, and technology will continue to sort of play a big role over there.
A few additional thoughts there. Well, one is innovation. I think a lot is happening on the product side. Looking at new products that can be brought to market, new, particularly voluntary offerings that can be, brought to mix, that are things that employees are looking for. and that some other innovative carriers, even outside of group, are offering that could be brought into the group context. When you think about some of the innovators coming into the market and trying to compete, they tend to have a really slick front end experience and have really focused on the experience angle of it. But the fact is, insurance is a highly regulated business, and the back end, having the product defined and understanding all the regulations and rules is something that they've generally struggled with and been a barrier to them succeeding. And the question is, how will that, change? And I know that, regulatory bodies have started to use or put in place a task force to help educate the different regulatory bodies in the states around innovation to perhaps open some of those doors and make it not quite so onerous for that competition to come in, which could be an interesting outcome of all of this, to be honest.
Yeah. And not to forget, products is one piece, but we do see conversations now shifting towards services as well, right?
Yes.
Can you sort of, bundle value-added services? EAP been an example. Okay, that's one, but what else can you offer, from a service standpoint that may be ancillary or adjacent to this market, right? How do you offer sort of, services in addition to just the products and still sort of drive that growth top line?
I've often said that that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the easy thing to really begin to offer, and customers are willing to pay for that. Whether it's an individual or an employee, our research shows that they're ready and willing to do it because it makes their lives easier because they kind of get that bundled kind of approach.
It's funny, Denise. A few years ago, there was less of that, right? It was almost a loss leader and a requirement, and now everybody's begging everybody because the regulatory environment is getting so much more complicated. Everybody's like, I will pay for this now. Take it.
Exactly.
But again, sort of the thing to note over there is, if your research is suggesting, employees are wanting to buy, more value-added services, that's one thing. But where and how are you going to offer those, right? And going back to my earlier sort of discussion around, are you present at the right customer hub, right, to be able to offer those services, because you just don't have access, unfortunately. Or can you get the data that you can then access some of this customer and offer those services? Big discussion. So
how do you change that approach? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, insurance is, we just had this conversation last week with all the executives. Insurance is often sold, not bought. And how do you change that paradigm? Is going to be something to think about.
Yeah. So this segment's really poised for a lot of change. What do you guys, each of you, and I'll start with you, Dave, what's your view and what do you think will be the areas of acceleration of change over, from a digital transformation standpoint?
I think digital is just one piece of it, right? I think creating more modular products that give you a better ability to be able to personalize your offerings to your constituents. I think that, and I don't want to discount that. It's a combination probably of, modularity of your products, but also new product offerings and having a broader portfolio that you can bring to bear. A huge change that I think we'll see over the next few years. I think there's a number of carriers who have outsourced certain capabilities in the past. And I think that they may be looking to try and bring those in to have more control over the overall experience. And I think that's a trend that I think we'll continue to see over the next few years. I think that it almost reminds me that, the move to voluntary, we've been talking about it for, probably a dozen years, and it's been a slow move. And the question is, what will actually get that to accelerate? And I think it'll be a combination of the changes in the workforce and the changes in products that are being offered that might actually create the momentum there.
Great point. Bobby?
One thing, Denise, we're talking about trends, you said. I think one thing that we did not talk about is the broker or the distributor landscape itself, right? You see there is a new entrant of, technology players over there, right? If you look at the new sort of benefit administration platforms that are coming to the market, very tech savvy, they have the control over the files and the customer data itself. That space going to be disrupted. Are they going to move towards being more brokers, as they start to take a cut from the sale as well in terms of incentives, right? So that's something that needs to be watched carefully as well.
Yep, exactly. To kind of wrap this all up, if you could pick one word to describe the future of insurance for voluntary benefits and group, what would it be and why? Dave, do you want to go first?
Sure. One word. Let's go with personalized. I
Ooh.
think that the industry, if we really want to both help people and generate greater business, greater revenues, it's being able to understand what they need and being able to offer them what they need when they need it.
Couldn't agree more. Abby.
From my perspective, that word would be happening, right? That's just predominantly because they're all sitting on the verge of transformation, and as we know, that is always a fun place to be at because you are transforming for the future. That creates new opportunities, both in terms of sources for growth, but also sort of improving your efficiency from an organization standpoint. And from a future standpoint, I foresee this space to continue to be happening over the next few years. And really, if you look at the insurance as a landscape in itself, PNC has gone through its wave. Life and annuities has gone through its wave to some extent. You see a lot of innovation there. Retirement is going through the wave, and group and voluntary benefits was the laggard if you talk about peers, right? And that wave has just sort of started about 4 or 5 years ago, right? So this will continue to be a space that will have a lot of activity, both in terms of M&A volume that we've seen in the past, but also in terms of just the share investments that are going in these organizations. So
Okay. I would wrap it up to say it's going to be exciting with all that we
Wait a
talked
minute, you
about.
can't get off that easy, Denise. I want to hear your one word.
I said exciting. Exciting because when I think about everything that we talked about here today, it's kind of one of the most exciting times, I think, in the industry for voluntary benefits and group. I mean, we've had some changes in the past, but there's so many opportunities here. While there's a lot of challenges, it also behooves a lot of opportunity, and an opportunity for those that really, I think, look to the future, really are very strategic in their thinking, look to that operational business model different way, and look to this next generation of employees in a workforce that I just see lots of opportunity for those that really can grasp hold of it and really lead and be bold in this future. That's what I see. So it's been great chatting with you two. This is just a preview of a lot of conversations we're going to have with people in the industry over the course of the next year as we work together. And I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to the partnership in helping to accelerate the opportunities in the industry. So thank you both, Dave and Abhi, for all of your great insights, the work that you do in the industry, and for the partnership.
Same here, and thank you, Denise.
thank you, Denise.